6 years ago, I released my first game inside PlayStation's creation engine, Dreams. Arena of Disco, a surreal, neon-lit first-person shooter. Today I want to learn how to make games in professional PC software. I tried multiple times over the years, but I always bounced off due to the learning curve. This time though, it did feel like I had momentum in my favor. Today is the 8th of June. I'm hot off a brutal 2-month period of learning the basics of Unreal, which I will have made a video on for you to watch. My next plan? Making a game and giving you the most authentic telling of what it actually looks like to do something like this. I could not have foreseen the turn my life was about to take in a few weeks. I felt ready for this. Here's the plan. Between opening Dreams for the first time and releasing my first game were only 5 months of learning, messing around and creating small projects. By coincidence, I started learning Unreal very close to the same date as Dreams. I want to follow in my own footsteps of 6 years ago, follow the same timeline and make the same game at the end. An Unreal 5 remake of Arena of Disco. This is honestly an insane idea. If learning Dreams was a hill, PC game dev is a cliff. I'm facing multiple complex professional programs, pipelines and all the math and terminology that comes with them. But I have my secret weapon, and it is that Dreams journey. 4 years, thousands of hours spent creating games and honing my design skills. I know what I want, I know what I need, and in this way I have what no novice game developer has: a clear goal. The original Arena of Disco is quite a simple game. It has only 2 levels, 2 enemy types and a single gun. You do need to reload, but has infinite ammo. Remember, this is my first game, so it's not even particularly good. I don't know what you were expecting. The reload animation is awful. The combat barely functions and is very frustrating. Only the art direction holds up in any way in my opinion. So with my remake then, I would like to expand and improve on the game just a little bit. That said, I do know how to scope my games and I will not allow this project to get out of control. My goal is very much to reach parity first and foremost. For example, the arms I used for the player character in Dreams are just the default arms painted black with a glowing cylinder acting as a bracelet. I'm not going to hold myself to a higher standard in Unreal. This project is not about finding the way to make a game, it's about finding some way to make a game. Exploring the entire game development pipeline from beginning to end will be a much more fruitful learning experience than getting my perfectionist brain stuck for 5 months concocting the perfect texture or something. Perfect is the enemy of good, people. Now the deadline was already quickly approaching. I needed to have a functioning version of the Arena of Disco remake before the 27th of September to beat my 19-year-old self 6 years ago. It was already June 10th. Everything I've done, everything I've learned, it all came down to this. Now where do I start? Well, gameplay is pretty important, I think. This immediately led me to a side quest. Back in Dreams, before I even made Arena of Disco, I first created my iconic advanced FPS template. I expanded and optimized it greatly over the years, resulting in a template that I ended up using for literally every first-person shooter I made. So, what if I followed in my own footsteps here too? First making a customizable FPS template, then making my game, and afterwards upgrading the template with the gained knowledge. Fantastic idea, but even though I made this experimental character to prove to myself I could actually do things in Unreal now, I wasn't actually comfortable using this improvised setup as the base of my FPS template. Considering I'd probably want to keep making first-person shooters into the future, I thought I might as well try to learn doing it the proper industry standard way. A strong foundation always pays off. Which is why I spent money on another course. So, today is the 11th of June. Right now, I still know nothing about FPS design in Unreal. Now, the 24th of June, 6 years ago, I released the first version of my FPS template, so I have about 2 weeks to figure this all out if I want to stay on track with those milestones. Let's get started on the course. From the start, it was clear this course was different than the other. I did not have a smooth time at all. I ran into a bunch of problems, but also just didn't learn much from it. My blood quickly reached boiling point and I decided this was not worth my time. Okay, so it's 1 day later and I've basically been playing the course at 2 times speed from the start. It's doing literally nothing for me. The course is outdated, leaving me to figure out a lot of technical stuff I wouldn't have to deal with otherwise. The course is catered to beginners, which I'm now not anymore. I do now genuinely know basically everything it's been trying to teach me in way more depth. And the worst part is, the course is surface level. I don't trust it. I don't trust that it's teaching me the industry standard and proper way of doing things, unlike the previous course I followed. It's not giving me foundational knowledge I can apply, it's just showing me how to make a very particular thing in a rushed way, with so many custom assets that I'm still none the wiser as to what my eventual creation pipeline will look like. Waste of time. And waste of money, unfortunately. Slightly frustrated, I spent some more time trying to find a good course, even going back to YouTube to search for a quality tutorial, but none satisfied me. Fine, I'll do it myself anyway and deal with the consequences of bad programming later, I thought. Which, yeah, that was the entire goal of this project. Remember, perfect is the enemy of good. I had to keep reminding myself. But just as I was about to open a new project in Unreal to start working on this FPS template for real, I got hit with a wave of demotivation. I knew exactly why. This is one of the moments I was dreading from the start. Yes, I do prefer making gameplay first before getting sucked into environment art and the like, but I don't find it satisfying to make gameplay in a complete art vacuum. When I made my FPS template in Dreams, I didn't first program all gameplay functionality on an empty actor and only then started adding the arms, guns, animations and sound effects. I did all of that during the programming whenever it made sense. I couldn't carry on programming in Unreal as long as this dark cloud hovered above my head. I knew what this meant. I'd need to learn 3D modeling, texture painting, rigging, animating and exporting in the art program Blender. Now I dislike watching tutorials as much as the next guy, but making and animating assets and exporting them to Unreal was a skill I was 100% going to need in the future. So I had to go for it, learning a whole other program directly after barely surviving the 60 days of banging my head against the wall in Unreal. Today is June 13th. The last 2 days haven't been too productive, so let's see if today can make a difference. Let's learn Blender. This time I did go for a YouTube tutorial, the iconic Donut series by Blender Guru, of course. Now this was not actually my first time touching Blender, nor a version of this course. Here's my beautiful actual first ever render in the program, but this was years ago. I went in with different goals this attempt around, but having seen some of the stuff before was very helpful. I had a surprisingly smooth time initially. Blender just feels focused, less bloated than Unreal, and uses a crap ton of hotkeys, allowing for very efficient work after the initial bump. Going back to Unreal would feel like going back in time after this. It has barely any use for hotkeys, rather defaulting to clicking, dragging and scrolling through menus. Still, smooth as things appeared at first, I would quickly be reminded that making your own thing is magnitudes more difficult. Sometime into the tutorial, Blender Guru challenges you to model your own plate for the donuts to sit on. And it was that moment when I threw a cylinder into my scene, I immediately felt like I had no idea what I was doing again. I was tumbling around like a fool. It didn't take me long to get something resembling a plate, but no step along the way I took with any confidence.
I'm quite proud of that, actually. That's pretty good. Look at that plate. Incredible.
Now honestly, I should have stopped the tutorial after finishing that plate, but I continued on and finished the latter parts of the tutorial series as well, which go more into rendering and materials and the like. Not terribly important for game development, but nice to have at least interacted with, and I had this final polished animation to show for it. I had officially unlocked the skill of basic 3D modeling, with a brief introduction to texture painting as well. This meant that I could now get to work on the first assets for my remake. It was time to model the gun. For my original FPS template, I took a FAMAS gun asset from someone else. Then in Arena of Disco, I used the template as my base and stuck a bunch of glow sticks on it for atmosphere. For my new template, I don't want to remake this, I don't like the look of it anymore. What I do like the look of is the gun I modeled and kit bashed together for Dream Relentless, another shooter I'd make in Dreams about half a year later. So I opened the old project in Dreams and started taking screenshots of the weapon to use as reference. Then the time came for Blender again. The days of the program feeling smooth and easy to use were officially over. Now came the days of Blender feeling finicky and annoying instead. So often I'd spend endless time dragging vertices around back and forth, or the model would come apart in some way and I didn't know how to fix it. Then came the Picatinny reel. There are these moments that I'd have in Dreams as well, actually, where even the thought of thinking through a problem just becomes too much all of a sudden, and I end up brute forcing the whole thing, which is what I did here. It took so long just selecting every face to manipulate over and over again. Oh my god, I'm awful at this, I don't know what to say. I was not making quick progress. The modeling of this gun was a multi-day process. 3D modeling, for that reason, is not a discipline I actually take that much enjoyment in. Compared to programming, where I can prototype entire mechanics in minutes, I feel like I get way less in return for spending similar time modeling. Still, it was nice to work on something a bit more tactile than logic. In the end, it took me 3 days to make the gun model, but I was happy with the final result. So next, get that gun into Unreal, right? Not really. This may have only been the easy part of learning Blender, because I want animated arms and hands in my game. So still on my never-ending list of stuff to learn was character modeling, rigging, animating and exporting. Yay! More tutorials! I found this great 2-part series by Joey Carlino. I decided I was going to make a little duck character, animate it and have that be my official first bridge between Blender and Unreal. This was going to be hard, wasn't it? Well, I really have to hand it to Mr. Carlino. He has some fantastic efficient ways to model characters. If you had gone back a year and asked me to rattle off reasons why I was scared to start my game dev journey, I guarantee it wouldn't have taken long before I'd mention having to model hands at some point. Guns, hard surface stuff, that seems possible, but organic, especially anatomy stuff, even in dreams, I've never done this. I used other people's assets, always. So you can imagine now how much of a weight left from my shoulders when this here man, Joey Carlino, taught me how to make hands using only 10 vertices. Blender does the dirty work, I stay clean. Fantastic. Now the result does look cartoony. And I don't care, because that's how it was in the original Arena of Disco anyways. We can continue. Up next, rigging, which is the act of setting up a static mesh to be deformed in specific ways by adding a skeleton beneath and setting up parameters for which polygons move with which bone and how much deformation, etc. Rigging is one of those words I've heard fearfully whispered through the hallways of game development for years. Now my time had come to feel the pain. Admittedly, I did some of that. But I have to say, here too, this is not actually as complicated as I feared it would be. The scary step of skinning the mesh, adding weights to it to signify how much and which part of the mesh deforms, I could completely automate even. One button press and it worked just fine. If I went ahead with layers of clothing, detailed anatomically correct assets, sure, I can imagine this turning into a nightmare. But a rig just to make a simple character move? Doable. Which meant that before I knew it, only animation was left. Animation in Blender is definitely a lot more overwhelming than it was in Dreams. I still struggle figuring out best practices. But for a first experiment, I quickly got the gist of it. And as it turns out, Blender has an auto-keying feature that works very similarly to the action recorder in Dreams, where you can manipulate an object and have the program record the movements directly into an animation real time. Did not expect that, but was very handy for this first test. I made the duck do a silly little dance on loop. Not perfect, but perfect is the enemy of good. Good enough in this case. I finally saw light at the end of the learning tunnel. I now had basic skills in 3D modeling, animating and rigging. All things I was scared of from the start, but turned out fine in the end. And it had barely been a week since I started learning Blender. Still though, the scariest step of them all remained. Exporting from Blender to Unreal. I cannot tell you how impossible the idea of dealing with multiple programs seemed to me coming from Dreams. Working in one and hoping the other just accepts the file. Blender and Unreal have completely different material systems, a different measurement unit and even a different coordinate system. They can't even agree on if the y-axis points forwards or sideways. I was expecting errors upon errors. So now came the moment of truth. I saved the character as an industry standard .fbx file along with its dance animation and dragged the file into Unreal. My fears became a reality instantly. I got an error, the model imported broken, and when I tried applying the animation, it stayed in T-pose. I quickly figured out the major mistakes I had made, like forgetting to select the head to export it and not applying modifiers, but much more insidious exporting problems would be coming my way quickly, even though for now, everything appeared to actually work. The duck had landed. The first official bridge between Blender and Unreal had been built. I had all the information I needed now, or at least I thought so, and it hadn't even taken me that long to get here. I literally just realized it's been 10 days since I started learning Blender, and I'm honestly very satisfied with the progress I've made so far. I'm probably very similar in skill level now to what I was in Dreams back in the day around the same time. Now still, the sheer amount of things I've needed to learn for Blender way outnumber the things I needed to learn in Dreams. And however quick I'm learning these, it might just not be quick enough. Tomorrow is the 24th of June, meaning that tomorrow I want to have my finished FPS template in Unreal Engine. I need to get back to work. That I did. Now came the time to finally make the FPS rig. I was fast now. It only took 20 minutes to model the arms and hands, 30 minutes to rig the whole thing for Unreal. Pumping with excitement, I imported the gun model into the rig file and attached it to the right hand, so I could make my first FPS base pose, firing and idle animations. I honestly never thought I'd be able to get to this point, having the ability to 3D model, animate and program and combine them all. I exported the entire thing to Unreal and with the previously acquired knowledge now, faced zero errors. It just worked. Absolutely one of my happiest moments so far. That said, there were issues. First of all, because Blender has that different coordinate system, my models imported sideways. I compensated by simply rotating the thing, but this is something I did want to fix in the future. Secondly, well, the shading of the gun looked shimmery, artifacty and awful. Not at all what it looked like in Blender. Then thirdly, once I played the idle animation in Unreal, I realized the animations didn't actually export correctly. The animations were suddenly shaky and imprecise. It's like the animation was rounding up the coordinates and in the process getting everything misaligned. These issues persisted even the next day, the day I wanted to have my entire FPS template with basic functions finished. I fumbled around and got nowhere. I failed my deadline for now. It would take 4 days for me to finally fix the shading. The tutorial I used to learn exporting gave me the wrong setting. I still did not know what the shakiness in the animation was about, but since I was behind now, I went ahead and started work on the final version of my FPS rig anyway. Using another godlike fantastic tutorial series, this time by Infima Games, I was able to put together a much more professional modular animation rig for my FPS character, which would also play better with Unreal. The main difference would be that the gun and magazine would be entirely separate objects now, that I'd attach back to the rig in Unreal. So that's what I did. And then I ran into another huge export issue: scale. This is so obnoxious, right? But Blender uses meters as its base units, Unreal centimeters. Meaning that if you don't know what you're doing, things will import scaled wrong by a factor of 100. Now I thought I knew what I was doing, after all my models were importing the correct scale, right? But something about skeletons in particular didn't play along with this value. So now when I attached my correctly scaled gun to the correctly scaled rig in Unreal, it was somehow 100 times too big. I didn't know how to fix it properly, so the solution I ended up going for was scaling up the skeleton 100 times in Blender, setting that as its default scale, and then scaling it back down 100 times. This makes it the same size as it was, right? But Blender now notes it's 100 times smaller than normal quotation marks. So attaching anything to it in Unreal was going to make it 100 times smaller. Kind of a messy solution, and still, I found nothing for the shakiness of the animation. I was slowly going insane and falling further and further behind. This is the moment this video takes a turn. See, up until this point I had made some pretty insane progress. It had only been 3 months since I started learning Unreal in April. My strategy was ruthless. I was going to face any problems head on. No more stopping dead in my tracks and procrastinating. If I saw a wall in front of me, I was going to run towards it and demolish it. No thinking, just doing. Perfect is the enemy of good. That's why I didn't hesitate learning Blender and everything surrounding it once the time came. I was focused. But focus doesn't come for free. I've said it before, but the hardest thing about doing something like game development is not the act of working with these programs themselves, but overcoming the inevitable mental barricades along the way. Things like stress, anxiety, depression, doubts, creative burnout. These will kill your game before any annoying bug does, okay? Creative endeavors are battles of mental endurance, nothing else. This is about to become a lot more personal, but there's a reason why I could focus around the time that I did at first. My life was becoming formulaic and boring. I craved the creative outlet I had in Dreams and found it again in Unreal. But what happens when your real life does suddenly become busy and eventful again? Because that's what happened mid-June. I suddenly had to work a lot more. I met up with friends a lot. I started working out again. And of course, at the moment I least expected it, a girl walked into my life. My mind was hijacked. How can I think about a janky animation in Unreal when the other decisions I'm making in life might literally be shaping my entire future? This whole thing was a huge deal to me because, well, we're all gamers here, right? Like, if you think I'm inexperienced with game development, you should see how inexperienced I am with love. I basically suddenly had an entire other avenue of learning added to my life. I willingly spent all available time exploring this new path and with zero regrets, let it be clear, but the result was that where I was able to make such awesome progress before, I now had little motivation and even less time to sit behind a computer in deep focus. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't alluring anymore. And the moment I would open these programs, my train of thought became incoherent, drifting all over the place. Even when I'd find a moment of clarity, I'd suddenly get a text message or something, instantly derailing me for the rest of the day. This is not a good thing for anyone involved. Dating should not derail your personal life, but it's just the reality of what happens in the brain, isn't it? It's just impossible to force yourself to work through nasty techie problems in a state like I was. Well, almost impossible, because a week after fixing the scale issue, I finally found out the stupid simplify export option in Blender that I was sure I tested before and didn't do its job worked after all. With this option, I could add a factor 100 higher degree of precision to the exported animation. Finally, smooth. A well-deserved victory after all. So, on the 9th of July, I finally had a semi-bug-free Blender to Unreal pipeline. And that's the last thing I did basically. The combination of long work hours and serious dating became so unbelievably stressful after this, the mental whiplash of it all sent me near instantly into burnout territory, a feeling I'm just now recovering from. I'd also go on vacation in this time and even live with a girl for a while, leaving me away from development for weeks on end, making it even harder to dive back in on return. And just as I was about to claw back after 2 months of complete mental stasis, the inevitable breakup happened and I took another psychological hit. I just couldn't catch a break around this time. It was sure an interesting way to spend the summer, I'll say that. Now, setting yourself tight deadlines is a blessing and a curse. When I challenge myself, like I have in the past, to make a game in a short time frame, sure, I can make a fun YouTube video from it, but content has never been the goal. I just know it's the best way to stimulate me creatively. The games I've made on a deadline are the ones I'm happiest with, learned the most from, and I'm the proudest of. My favorite, all-around slickest game is the one I spent 10 days on, not the one I spent 6 months burning out on over and over. But you know what the similarity had been between all the games I set myself a deadline for? I actually finished them in or around that time. In this case, I missed my deadlines hard fairly early on. And that is a scenario that is, well, new to me. If I give up, it means failure, not an option. If I do away with the deadline entirely and give myself all the time in the world now, I'll never finish it, I'll get too stuck in small things, and I know it. So the only sensible thing is moving the deadline 2 months. This experiment is not yet completed. I still want to know how far I can get in Unreal versus Dreams in the same time frame. I don't even know if it's possible to have a functioning game by the 27th of November now, but I'll try anyway. Thank you for watching, I'll see you around.